History is often remembered through the triumphs of the victors, while the struggles of the defeated slowly fade into silence. The Seleucid War of 192 BC is one such forgotten conflict, overshadowed by Rome's later conquests and by the dramatic fall of other great empires. Yet this war marked a turning point in Mediterranean and Near Eastern history. It was the moment when the ancient Hellenistic world, born from the legacy of Alexander the Great, collided head-on with the unstoppable rise of Rome. At its center stood Antiochus III, known to history as Antiochus the Great, a king who dared to challenge Roman authority and dreamed of restoring the glory of Alexander's empire. After the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC, his vast empire did not pass peacefully to a single heir. Instead, it fractured in decades of brutal conflict among his generals, the Diadochi. From these wars emerged several powerful Hellenistic kingdoms, each ruled by Macedonian dynasties but governing diverse populations. One of the largest and most complex of these states was the Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus I Nicator. Stretching from Asia Minor through Syria and Mesopotamia to parts of Persia and Central Asia, it was an empire rich in land and culture, but perpetually unstable. By the early 2nd century BC, the Seleucid Empire had endured decades of internal revolts, dynastic struggles, and foreign wars. When Antiochus III came to the throne in 223 BC, the empire was weakened and shrinking. Provinces had broken away, rivals threatened its borders, and local governors often acted independently. Antiochus inherited not a stable kingdom but a challenge. Over the next 3 decades, he worked tirelessly to reverse Seleucid decline. Through a series of military campaigns known as the Eastern Anabasis, he marched deep into the eastern territories, reasserting control over Media, Persia, and Bactria. These victories earned him the title the Great and revived hopes that the Seleucid Empire could once again dominate the Hellenistic world. Antiochus also turned his attention westward. Asia Minor and the Aegean world had long been contested between Hellenistic powers. The Seleucids clashed repeatedly with the Ptolemies of Egypt in the Syrian Wars, fighting over control of Syria. In 200 BC, Antiochus won a decisive victory against Egypt at the Battle of Panium, securing the region and establishing Seleucid dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. To many Greek cities, Antiochus appeared not as a tyrant, but as a liberator from Ptolemaic rule. At the same time, a new power was rising in the west. Rome, once a regional Italian state, had emerged victorious from the Second Punic War against Carthage in 201 BC. Hardened by decades of warfare and backed by vast manpower reserves, Rome now looked eastward. Though Roman leaders claimed they sought only peace and stability, their growing influence was impossible to ignore. Rome intervened in Greek affairs, presenting itself as a protector of freedom while steadily expanding its control. Tension between Rome and the Seleucid Empire grew gradually. Antiochus did not initially seek war with Rome. His ambitions were rooted in the Hellenistic world, not in Italy. However, events in Greece pushed the two powers toward confrontation. Many Greek states were deeply divided, torn between loyalty to Rome and resentment of Roman interference. Among the most vocal opponents of Rome was the Aetolian League, a confederation of Greek city-states that felt betrayed by Rome after the Macedonian Wars. In 192 BC, the Aetolians invited Antiochus III to Greece, urging him to present himself as the champion of Greek freedom against Roman domination. For Antiochus, this invitation was both tempting and dangerous. It offered an opportunity to extend Seleucid influence into Greece and to position himself as the successor of Alexander, liberator of the Hellenes. At the same time, it risked provoking Rome into open war. Antiochus accepted the invitation. When he landed in Greece with his army, he was not accompanied by the massive forces one might expect from a ruler of his reputation. His army was relatively small, composed of Seleucid troops and mercenaries. Antiochus seemed to believe that Greek cities would rally to his cause, swelling his ranks and legitimizing his presence. This assumption would prove to be one of his greatest miscalculations. Instead of widespread support, Antiochus encountered hesitation and fear. Many Greek states had come to see Rome as the dominant power and were unwilling to risk Roman retaliation. Even those who resented Rome doubted Antiochus's ability to defeat it. As a result, his support in Greece remained limited, largely confined to the Aetolian League and a few sympathetic cities. Rome responded swiftly. Viewing Antiochus's presence in Greece as a direct threat, the Roman Senate declared war. Roman legions, experienced and disciplined, marched into Greece alongside their allies. The confrontation that followed revealed the growing gap between Roman and Hellenistic military systems. While Hellenistic armies relied heavily on the phalanx, a dense formation of spearmen, Roman legions were more flexible, adaptable, and capable of fighting effectively on varied terrain. The first major clash occurred at Thermopylae in 191 BC, a location immortalized by the legendary stand of the Spartans centuries earlier. Antiochus chose the narrow pass, hoping to replicate the defensive success of the past. However, history did not repeat itself. Roman forces outmaneuvered the Seleucid army, using mountain paths to attack from the rear. Antiochus's troops were overwhelmed, and the Seleucid king was forced to retreat in defeat. The defeat at Thermopylae shattered Antiochus's position in Greece. His allies abandoned him, and his dream of leading a pan-Hellenic resistance collapsed. Antiochus withdrew to Asia Minor, hoping to regroup and defend his core territories. Rome, however, was no longer content with driving him out of Greece. The war had escalated. Roman leaders now sought to break Seleucid power permanently. In 190 BC, Roman forces crossed into Asia Minor, accompanied by their allies, including Pergamon, a longtime rival of the Seleucids. The decisive confrontation came at the Battle of Magnesia. Antiochus assembled one of the largest armies the Seleucid Empire had ever fielded, drawing troops from across his vast domains. War elephants, heavy cavalry, and phalanxes stood ready, representing the full might of Hellenistic warfare. Yet size and spectacle could not compensate for strategic weaknesses. The Roman army, commanded by Lucius Cornelius, Scipio, and advised by his famous brother Scipio Africanus, exploited the rigidity of the Seleucid formations. When the battle began, Roman discipline and tactical flexibility proved decisive. Seleucid war elephants panicked, causing chaos among Antiochus's own ranks. The phalanx, once the terror of the battlefield, struggled to adapt. By the end of the day, Antiochus's army was decisively defeated. The defeat at Magnesia marked the end of Antiochus's challenge to Rome. The subsequent Treaty of Apamea in 188 BC imposed harsh terms on the Seleucid Empire. Antiochus was forced to surrender large territories in Asia Minor, pay a massive war indemnity, limit his military capabilities, and hand over hostages, including his own son, the future Antiochus IV Epiphanes. The empire that Antiochus had worked so hard to restore was once again reduced and weakened. Although the Seleucid War began in 192 BC, its consequences extended far beyond its initial outbreak. The war signaled the end of Seleucid ambitions in the West and confirmed Rome as the dominant power in the Eastern Mediterranean. For the Greek world, it marked the fading of Hellenistic independence. Greek states would never again be truly free from external domination. For Antiochus III, The war was a tragic conclusion to an otherwise remarkable reign. He had come closer than any Seleucid ruler to restoring the empire's former glory. His earlier campaigns demonstrated skill, determination, and vision. Yet his confrontation with Rome revealed the limits of Hellenistic power in a changing world. Antiochus died in 187 BC during a later campaign in the east, leaving behind an empire burdened by debt and internal unrest. The Seleucid Empire survived for several more decades, but it never recovered from the blow dealt by Rome. Internal revolts, dynastic conflicts, and external pressures gradually eroded its strength. By the mid-1st century BC, the Seleucid state had effectively ceased to exist, absorbed into the expanding Roman sphere. The Seleucid War of 192 BC is often overlooked, overshadowed by Rome's later conquests and by more famous battles. Yet it deserves remembrance. It was the war that revealed the future of the ancient world. It showed that the age of Hellenistic kings, heirs to Alexander's legacy, was coming to an end. In its place rose a new order shaped by Roman power and Roman ambition. This forgotten war reminds us that history is not only about victory, but about transition. It is about the moment when one world fades and another begins. The clash between Antiochus the Great and Rome was not merely a military conflict. It was the collision of two eras. And in that collision, the fate of the ancient Mediterranean was forever changed.